Hello and welcome to the Physical Preparation Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Robertson, and I'll be joined on the line later today by Alex Wanee. Now, before we jump into this week's episode, I'm going to give you a very brief update on iFast, and then we're going to change gears to something that's a lot more positive. So, with regards to the gym, because people have been asking, yes, we have been shut down, unfortunately, for as little as 2, but most likely as long as 4 more weeks. Kind of sucks. The analogy I've been using is I feel a little bit like Charlie Brown. If you remember the old Charlie Brown comics and videos where Lucy puts the football down and he runs up and tries to kick it, and every time he does, she pulls it away and he flips over and lands on his back. That's kind of how I feel with this, because I keep thinking that we're going to get to reopen, and then, for whatever reason, we get pushed back further and further. So, look, that is what it is. At this point, I just told all of the members, billing is paused. We will reopen as soon as we can. But for the time being, we're just going to say that we are closed indefinitely until we have a better understanding of when we can actually open, because I'm with them. I'm with my people. I'm just tired of getting my hopes up and then having them dashed once again. So that is what it is. Let's move on. Let's talk about things that I can control and that I am pretty excited about. So I basically made 2 lists. I've got my personal list and my professional list. So we'll start personal first. Number 1, I don't know if you follow me on the gram. If not, you should. I feel like it's probably a decent follow for you. But I did get my weight room / video room pretty well set up in my basement. It's still a work in progress, but I've got the flooring down. I've got my whiteboard up. I moved the rack that was in my garage downstairs. Got a couple kettlebells in there, so it's pretty Spartan. I'd like to definitely add an adjustable dumbbell set at some point in time and some kettlebells. But with the financial situation, I'm sure you're there as well. I'm not really looking to make big investments in things that I could deem as more accessory. So it is coming, and I'm excited to start shooting some videos out of there. One thing I am not super happy with is kind of the lighting. I got some nice lights, but I haven't totally figured out how to set them up so that the whiteboard looks the way that I want it to. I'm getting this nasty reflection. So I'm going to have to get Paul, my video guru, to come and help me set that up. But excited that that's coming together. On a negative note, sort of, personally / professionally, the streak is broken. I went for 44 days consecutively where I was posting on Instagram. Most of those days, there was also a video up on YouTube as well. I don't want to say I ran out of content, but it was just one of those days where everything was happening. I got super busy. It got to be like 9:30 at night. I realized I hadn't shot anything, but honestly, I could trace it back to generally on Monday, I will set up my social media playlist for the week, if you will. I didn't do it that week. So like Monday and Tuesday, I was kind of scrambling. So then Wednesday came around and I was done for. Didn't get it done. So time to start a new streak. I'm excited to make that happen. But I will get to 90 days sooner or later. Pizza Movie Night has been a smashing success. We went through the Cars series. That was Cade's choice, and then alternated that with various princess movies. So that was fun because I still like that Kendall likes to watch, princess movies, and we had not, or at least I don't think I had ever seen The Princess and the Frog, ever. I don't think I'd ever seen all of that, and I was pleasantly surprised at that. It was very entertaining. So enjoyed that, and then as I'm recording this, it is Star Wars Day. So I am just going through full nerd mode because, we were doing the princess movies and all that, but now we're back into Harry Potter. And then today is Star Wars Day. So when I'm done, kids and I are going to go watch the final episode of the Clone Wars. So we are nerding out pretty hard around here. So if you're a nerd too, hopefully you enjoy Star Wars Day. There's all kinds of cool stuff today. I feel like last episode of the Clone Wars, there's supposedly a Mandalorian, making the Mandalorian documentary coming out. Rise of Skywalker's out on Disney Plus. So excited, for all that stuff. And I was thinking about it today. I walked the dog, and, with all the professional stuff and all the stress that comes with having your kids around all day, it's pretty nice that pretty much every day I can have breakfast, lunch, and dinner with my kids right now. So that part is definitely awesome. On the professional side, making some moves, trying to get myself almost 100% digital with regards to my online training and coaching. So what I mean by that, it's always been digital, obviously. But in the past, what I would use was either Excel in the very early days or more recently Word. I mean, everything was hyperlinked and it was really nice. I mean, it's easy to follow, but I wanted something just a little bit sexier, for lack of a better term. So in recent months, I moved over to Train Heroic, really enjoying that platform. It's definitely a learning curve, at least for me. I mean, I'm in my 40s, so everything technology-wise, I feel like has a little bit steeper learning curve now than it did 10 years ago. But definitely liking the platform. And most importantly, I know my athletes are really liking it. The people that I'm training remotely love the fact that they don't have to go somewhere else to go watch a video. Like they don't have to have it on their phone and their email or in their messages and then like click a link and then go to YouTube and then go back. It's all embedded right there. They can track their weights. There's a pre and post workout questionnaire so they can make sure that they're feeling right, and I can see how they're feeling each and every day. So it's a really sweet setup. You know, I don't get paid anything to say that. I just think so far I'm very happy with that platform. The videos, right? Until last week, I mean, I cranked out 44 days in a row, so I was feeling good about that. Need to come up with some new content and basically just need to lock myself in my basement for about an hour one day and knock some stuff out. For whatever reason, Cade loves shooting videos with me and just hanging out and doing that. So I need to get that done, and those will continue to come. Don't worry about that. Podcast downloads. So the podcast has been super consistent for like the last 4 or 5 months. Very happy with where it's at. We're looking at 27,000 downloads every month, which I think is pretty darn good for a niche industry like the fitness industry. But one thing I would really like to do is hit 1,000 per month. So have a couple months where we cross 30. So I ask it later in the show or at the end, but man, if you'd be willing, if you're not already subscribed to the show, I feel like we've got really good people week in and week out. We've got great content. So if you're not already subscribed, do that. If you are subscribed, man, take 2 or 3 of your favorite shows and send it either to somebody in the fitness industry, a coach, a trainer, somebody that just likes working out, and share this with them. It would mean the world to me. And I think the more people we can expose to the awesome people that I have on this show, then our industry is immediately in a better place. Upcoming people. So last week was a big podcast week, right? So generally I try and knock out 3 or 4 episodes in a day. It just works better. I mean, it's a long day and I really have to be switched on. And it's been vastly more difficult when working around e-learning schedules and kids' Zoom calls and wife working from home. But it's just, that's the best way to do it versus kind of piecemealing them and doing like 1 a week or whatever. I just don't like doing it like that. It's just easier this way. So upcoming, I've got some awesome people. I've got Matej Hasevar coming back on the show. He's working on finishing up a master's in sports science. And I just think he's just such an awesome guy to talk to. So Matej's coming back on. I've got Erica Suter. Hopefully I'm pronouncing her last name correctly, but she is awesome in the soccer space. So I'm going to have her on. Yuri Piegel. I'm not sure if I'm saying his last name right either, but he's pretty big name in European basketball as far as physical preparation goes. And then Nick Grantham, who's a guy that, man, I had conversations and email threads back and forth with probably 12, 15 years ago, just kind of fell out of communication and we just kind of picked things back up. So I'm going to get Nick on the show. So really excited about some of them. That's going to be in May. So I've got a nice lineup coming up with them. And then last but not least, iFastU. So you're going to get the little standard message here in just a minute about iFastU. Little bit of a snafu there. So when Lance kind of gave us all the information, Bill and I decided we were going to kind of take things back over, revamp it, rebrand it. Lance gave us all the information. I passed it over to Matt Sizemore, who's like our web tech guy. And Matt's like, yeah, this should be pretty straightforward. I'm going to get everything updated. I'm going to put in like the new membership platform that Bill and I wanted to use and we can roll. So literally we're thinking this is like a 3, 5, maybe 7 day process max. So Matt gets in and realizes, oh, well, yeah, when I updated like some of the back end stuff, the entire site crashed. So then we start digging in and we find that the theme doesn't work with like new levels of PHP. And that just sounds like gobbledygook to me. But basically, the old theme is no longer supported. So not only do we have to try and take all the information that's on there, but we need to update the entire website, create a new theme, So with that being said, we have not forgotten about iFastU. iFastU will be up very, very shortly, even if it's in a base minimum viable product type format initially. And then we're going to start re-adding things as we go. So if you are listening to this and you are not signed up, go to iFast University. There should be a web form there. If the site is not live yet, you can at least sign up through the web form to get notifications so you'll know when it's up and when it's running, because man, Bill and I are so excited to get this back out there. The discussions that we've had over the last 6 months, where his head is at, some of the stuff that I've taken from his intensive and that I'm now using with my athletes, and just like the clarity that I have when I'm working with different athletes now. Super, super excited to get that out there. So this has gone a little bit longer than usual, but hopefully you don't mind. Just wanted to keep you guys updated and abreast as to what's going on. I hope you're surviving this very strange quarantine time that we're all living in and doing your best, right? Like some people are thriving. I think most of us are surviving. And I think surviving right now, trying to keep everything together and put Band-Aids on things and just try and get through the next couple weeks is a very viable goal, right? It's pretty hard to thrive in this environment, but do what you can, keep grinding, because sooner or later, we're going to be on the back end of this and we're going to be back to crushing life. So quick break, and then we're going to jump into this awesome, awesome show with my boy, Alex Wanee. One thing Bill Hartman and I have talked about for years now is the power of mentorship. Early on, I didn't have a mentor to shape or guide me, or most importantly, help me find the blind spots in my own training and coaching. But luckily, after many years of trial and error, I found Bill, and my professional success exploded as a result. But the downside to the mentorship process, at least professionally, is that it can be pricey. For private mentees that I work with, it costs anywhere from $3.99 to $5.99 per month to work together. And while I know the results go far beyond that price, the fact of the matter is that just won't work for a lot of folks. So when Bill and I sat down a while back, we asked ourselves a really tough question. How can we help shape the future of the industry and truly make it great? And beyond that, how can we create amazing content yet make it affordable to virtually every trainer or coach out there? And the answer for us was simple: restart iFast University. Here's what you'll get when you become a member of iFast University. One update each month from myself and Bill. This could cover anything from improving exercise technique to writing better programs and everything in between. Twice per month Q&As, where Bill and I will personally answer your questions to help you become better at training, coaching, or even running your fitness business. A Facebook group where you'll be surrounded by like-minded trainers and coaches who are serious about getting better, and access to the iFastU archives, where you'll be able to watch literally hundreds of pieces of content from the iFast team over the years. This blend of content and Q&A is specifically designed to help make you the best trainer or coach possible. If you're interested in learning more, head on over to ifastuniversity.com to get signed on. We'd love to have you on board. Alex Wanee is the performance director and co-owner of PitFit Training in Indianapolis, Indiana, where he has worked for the past 7 years. Alex primarily works with high-level motorsports athletes from IndyCar, NASCAR, and numerous other racing series, both at their Indianapolis facility and remotely across the world. In this show, Alex and I talk about how his pro basketball dreams dried up when he stopped growing, how he got started in professional motorsports, and the talk that kept him in the game. And then we take a deep dive into the performance traits necessary to be successful on the track and how to build them in the gym. This is a really awesome interview, and I know you're going to love it. But enough for me, let's do this. Alex, man, thanks so much for coming on the show here today. Really excited to chat with you. Could you start by just telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, first off, thanks for having me on, Mike. It's an honor to actually be here. But like you said, I'm the performance director at PitFit Training in Indianapolis, across the town from you guys at iFast.
Yep.
Hoosier born and raised, been here all my life, except spent a year and a half at school in Tennessee. Started working in the industry back in 2011 while I was finishing up my degree from your alma mater, Ball State.
Yeah.
And, yeah. And been at PitFit ever since.
Love it, man. Love it. So talk to me. What led you to the world of physical preparation? What got you started in all of this?
Well, those who can't do, teach, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. That's great. Yes.
Yeah. So I think my answer is probably similar to a lot of people in this profession. I've loved athletics for as long as I can remember. And I was a decent, but not a great athlete, which, fortunately I came to realize fairly early on. I'm a pretty competitive person, sometimes to a fault. And, I hated losing. So, from a fairly young age, I developed this mindset that I was going to outwork everybody, and that worked up until the point when I stopped growing at 5'7". So, so, even though my dreams of, becoming a Major League Baseball pitcher or, starting point guard for the Indiana Pacers was crushed, I knew I needed to find a career path that involves sports. So I actually started out as a sports journalism major at the University of Tennessee, but while I was there, I did what every other failed athlete does in college. I started powerlifting.
Yes. Yeah, there we go.
So, I just needed something to train for and to challenge myself with. But, being competitive and wanting to be as strong as possible, I started researching how to train. Kind of became my hobby. So, really, I probably read more articles on T Nation than I did pages in my college textbooks at the time.
Yeah.
So that kind of started planting the seeds, for the path that I ultimately chose. But I think what really made me make the switch to exercise science and the world of physical preparation was during my sophomore year. At the start of the spring semester, I got really sick to the point where I had to drop out and move back home. And
oh, wow.
I was pretty much bedridden for about 3 months and couldn't do any training for about 4. So I went from, 180 pounds, strongest I'd ever been, to, a 130 pound weakling.
Yeah. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So, it was a while ago, but, at the time I kind of identified as a powerlifter. So that was kind of a big blow to my ego, but, from that place, I was bound and determined to get back and become stronger than ever. So really it was during my first couple months getting back into training, that I realized what I wanted to do with my life, which was, to help, specifically athletes reach their full potential, keep them healthy and prolong their careers. So, that's the point where I decided hey, I'm going to transfer to Ball State and pursue an education in exercise science.
That's awesome, man. So talk to me about that point of you're getting into Ball State, you're getting started there. Give us an idea from when you finish up school to your career path, and just give us some insight as to what you do on the day-to-day basis now.
Yeah. So, I actually started training while I was in school at Ball State. So, I felt I was a little bit behind, if you will. I took a year off after high school, transferred, I changed majors. So I didn't really want to waste any time. So, I was working in Fishers, Indiana, and commuting up to Muncie, which is about a 45-minute trip each way.
Yep.
So working full time, going to school full time, and commuting was a grind.
Yeah.
It had its pros and cons. I got a lot of hands-on experience early working with all different types of people, which I think was huge in a lot of ways. But, the downside is that my schedule was so packed. I never really had an opportunity or really took the opportunity to pursue multiple internships or undergo a true mentorship. So, I did observation hours for school and had some shorter internships, but nothing that really ever allowed me to learn in depth under, specific people. So, ultimately, I think that stunted my growth in certain areas, but, I did have some good hands-on experience at an early age. So, but anyway, my senior year of school, one of my clients told me about PitFit. So I went and met Jim Leo, who
Yep.
And he convinced me that, training race car drivers was a pretty badass gig. So,
Which it is. It is, right?
Yeah. And I mean, in my early 20s, it's hey, man, I can't turn down the opportunity to work with athletes at the highest level of their sport right out of school. So, over the past 7 years, I've gone from intern to an independent contractor to performance director and now part owner in the company. And, I've loved pretty much every minute of it.
That's awesome, man. So talk to me, were you into motorsports, or was this something that you were kind of naive to walking into?
Oh, man. To be honest, for quite a while, even in the early days at PitFit, I thought I was still going to end up working with like football or baseball or something like that. I would say I grew up as a casual race fan.
Okay.
I've gone to the Indy 500 every year since I was about 5 years old.
Okay.
And I've followed open wheel racing a fair amount, but it definitely wasn't a passion of mine, like sports like baseball or basketball. So, but early on at PitFit, my now business partner Jim sat me down and asked me what I wanted out of my career. I was enjoying working there, but still in the back of my mind, I wasn't sure I'd stay. But Jim kind of put it like this. He said something to the tune of, you can either be one of thousands of coaches working in football, basketball, or baseball, or you can be one of a few who can help raise the standard for training in motorsports. So, that kind of framed things in a way where I recognize, I can be a high level coach in some other sport, but there are already, tons of great coaches out there working in those fields, working to get to that point. But, in motorsports, especially in North America, there's really a need for more high level coaches to raise the game to the level that, the other major sports are already at, so that opportunity really appealed to me.
Yeah.
I was enjoying working with the guys that I was working with, and I felt Jim and I complemented each other well. He has a great mind for business and is a master at networking. I don't really have a passion for the business side of things. So, that allowed me more time to pursue more opportunities to learn and better myself. So, all in all, it was a great fit. And every year, I grow to love my job more, the sport more. And I've definitely gained a far greater appreciation for what motorsports athletes do.
So I think this is really instructive. And I didn't put this in the show notes, but I think this will be really instructive for the people that are listening, because this happens to a lot of us, right? Mm-hmm. We know we want to work with athletes, and then we get thrust into this position or working with a group that we're not familiar with, right? Mm-hmm. And I'd like to think as coaches, we're pretty malleable. This time, and the situation that we're going through right now has proven that. But talk to me about when you're getting started, like how do you dive in and start to understand the sport? Like what was your process there as a essentially naive coach walking into this sports world? How did you start learning about that? What was your process like?
Yeah, so, it's a little different because, you and I can go out and we can play basketball, we can play baseball, we can play football, but you can't go to an IndyCar team and say, hey, let me take this thing for a joyride. So there's no way to really experience for yourself what's going on and what you can't feel the physical demands that it takes to drive one of those cars. So, a lot of it was, it was doing some research and stuff, but a lot of it was just getting it straight from the drivers themselves, creating that dialogue and trying to get an idea for, what they were feeling and translating that into terms of what we needed to do in the training process to better prepare them.
Gotcha. So what are the physical demands? Because again, like you said, you can't go out and experience it. I can't go out and experience it. So what are the demands that are placed on the body when they're trapped in this small confined space going at extremely fast speeds for 3 to 4 hours at a time?
Yeah. So, another unique thing about motorsports is that there are a ton of different series, so we work with drivers from all different series, and each series has different physical demands. Some are open cockpit, which allows for more airflow. So, while it's hot, it's not quite as hot as a car like in NASCAR with a closed cockpit. And, generally with an open cockpit, there's less exposure to carbon monoxide, which kind of has an effect on performance. So, most series allow for power steering, whereas IndyCar doesn't. Plus series like IndyCar and Formula One, the open wheel cars have cars that, produce a lot greater downforce, which magnifies the gravitational forces that drivers experience. But, I'd say let's just use IndyCar as an example, since to me, it's probably the most physically demanding racing series in the world.
Okay.
So, a lot of people watch the Indy 500 and, they think that driving an Indy car is kind of like driving your minivan around 465 here in Indianapolis. But, it's definitely not the case. So, first, when you think about the environmental factors, it's extremely hot. Cockpit temperatures in an Indy car climb north of, 120 degrees Fahrenheit.
Wow.
Which actually it's even going to be hotter this year if we get back to racing, because in the off season, they implemented an aero screen, which is just basically like a big piece of plexiglass that protects the driver's head. So definitely going to be reduced air circulations and thus, higher temperatures. So, but on top of the high cockpit temperatures, they're also wearing flame retardant suits that don't exactly breathe too well.
Right.
So obviously this in and of itself can significantly increase a driver's, perceived level of exertion for other demands. So, another environmental factor that I kind of alluded to was the exposure to carbon monoxide. So for those who don't know, carbon monoxide binds to hemoglobin, which prevents the transportation of oxygen to working muscles. So, for IndyCar, this isn't quite as bad as a series like NASCAR, but still the amounts that they're exposed to have definitely been shown to have a fairly significant negative effect on performance. And then, from a strength perspective, obviously it's much different from a sport like football or basketball. It's an endurance sport. So, benching 400 pounds, running a 4.40, having a 40-inch vert aren't really going to help you. So, but that said, there's definitely a need for, static, dynamic, and reactive strength.
Yeah.
The lower body demands aren't that great, but, a driver still needs to be able to generate close to about 1,500 PSI on the brake pedal. So, on a road or street course, where you're turning right and left, you actually have to use the brake. It's essentially like doing an explosive 135-pound leg press every few seconds for a couple hours.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's crazy.
So, that's something that most of our guys never really have an issue with that, but we do run into certain scenarios in which, we really have to develop the lower body. So it's somewhat of a concern, but as far as the upper body is concerned, as I mentioned earlier, there's no power steering in IndyCar. So, it takes anywhere from about 35 to 45 pounds of force output to turn the wheel. So on road courses, they have to turn and hold roughly, 3 to 5 seconds over and over again, several hundred times throughout the course of a race. And on ovals, particularly short ovals, you're pretty much turning the whole time, so your arms don't get much rest. So,
right.
But it's more than just static strength as well. When those cars get loose or the rear end starts to slide in a turn, the resistance from the wheel essentially just disappears. The driver has to make a correction to prevent the car from spinning. And at some point, the car regains its grip, and then bam, the resistance comes back and the wheel violently jerks back the other way. So,
right.
You got to be able to generate that force fairly quickly at times. So there's definitely an element of reactive strength in IndyCar. And then I'd say the last thing is, really demands on the neck are probably the most unique aspect to motorsports. At some tracks, these guys are pulling 4 to 5 Gs, which essentially turns your head into a 60-pound pendulum. So, if you can't hold your head up under those forces, it's going to affect your vision. So you're going to miss the apex of corner and lose precious time. And when you add all that up, the environmental factors, the other physical demands, along with the adrenaline that comes with going over 200 miles per hour, these guys end up working at heart rates upwards of 75% of their max heart rate for a couple hours without any break really, except for a couple 8-second pit stops. So,
right.
These guys really have to be elite level endurance athletes.
That's crazy. Okay. So you've kind of laid out the demands, and obviously massive upper body, lower body endurance effects, neck. There's a lot going on there. So how do you go about building a better or a superior race car driver in the gym? Where do you start with them?
Yeah. So, like I already said, it's really a matter of talking to the driver, trying to, get an idea for, what they're feeling in the car and translating that to what we need to do in the training process. But, really once you grasp what the drivers need, it really just boils down to efficiency. So I can help prepare them for the work capacity and power requirements, but, how economical are they with energy use in doing so? So the way we kind of look at things is, obviously energy is the currency of performance. And in any sport, energy is going to be used to deal with one of three things. It's going to go to physiological demands, cognitive tasks, and environmental factors. So now those three all overlap in some manner, but the goal is to make the driver as efficient as possible in dealing with all three of those areas. But as far as environment, there are several factors that we really can't make a huge impact on. Experience is really the best thing to kind of minimize the energy use that goes towards dealing with environmental stressors. But with something like the heat, we can definitely improve their efficiency working in those high temperatures. So, for one, being in better physical condition is going to reduce the negative impact of the heat. But, beyond that, we incorporate some heat acclimation training into the preseason process and at some points within the season just to optimize the body's thermoregulatory processes. From a cognitive standpoint, these guys have a lot going on during a race other than the physical demands that we already talked about. They have a lot of sensory inputs to respond to. They obviously have to worry about driving the car, hitting the apex of each turn, passing other cars, and defending against cars that are trying to pass them. And at the same time, they have to worry about saving fuel or conserving their tires. They have to feel what's going on within the car so they can make adjustments to things like, the weight balance or downforce to get the most out of the car during the race. And then they have this like a spotter in one ear talking to them over the radio and race strategist or a crew chief in the other ear. So there's a lot going on for them to process, and they have to have this laser-like focus for the whole duration of the race, because you let that focus go at 230 miles per hour even for a second, you're traveling a football field per second. So a lot can happen in just that split second. So now, as far as what we can do to improve sensory processing, it's far from an exact science. There are definitely studies out there that have shown that cognitive or, brain endurance training has reduced the rates of perceived exertion during endurance training or events in comparison to the control groups without. But, the field is still very much in its infancy. So, there's a lot more research that needs to be done. So I guess to some level, a lot of what we do in that realm is guesswork to some degree as far as, what methods and in what amounts. But ultimately, though, we incorporate drills into the training session that, challenge a driver's working memory or problem solving ability using, some sort of like visual, auditory or tactile input, and we generally do this under a level of fatigue similar to what they experience in the car. So, this is definitely an area in which we're looking to learn more and refine our processes, as more research comes out. But, at the end of the day, our drivers definitely see a benefit to it. And, if it gives them a higher level of confidence in the car, then they're going to perform better. So
absolutely.
And then from a strength standpoint, a great part of it is knowing the point of diminishing returns. So yeah, these guys have to have a strong upper body, but they also can't add a whole lot of mass. It benefits them to be a little on the lighter side. So our challenge is to make sure they have an adequate amount of strength and the least body mass possible. So, and then finally, these guys have to be very well conditioned. They need to have a very well developed aerobic system and, to some degree, lactic and alactic as well. So, all in all, what we tell our guys is that, the more efficient we can make you in dealing with these factors, the less energy you're going to burn and the longer you're going to be able to go out and execute your skills at 100%.
So, random question here, but is there like a standard size for, say, IndyCar drivers? Like, I'm just thinking, like, you think about efficiency on like horse riding, right? Or horseback racing. I mean, the jockeys are small, but, obviously I'm assuming these guys are a little bit bigger and they got to carry a little bit of muscle. But, what is there an average size, or do you have all different shapes and sizes?
So, we've worked with, drivers that are 5'3", 5'4", and like 120, 130 pounds. And then, we've also had a guy that was like 6'3", 6'4", and, about 200 pounds. So,
oh, wow.
And then there's everything in between. So I'd say most people are actually kind of built somewhat like me, which is, kind of nice
That
being
helps. Yeah.
on the shorter side. I don't have to like crane my neck looking up at a 6'6" basketball player all day. But
Yes.
yeah, so there's some variety. I'd say most guys are, in the like 5'9", 5'10" range, and roughly 150, 160 pounds.
Gotcha. Yeah, because it sounds like relative strength. You can't be just a huge human being and have a ton of relative strength and a ton of endurance and a ton of efficiency. So I kind of figured they would be a little bit more, I don't want to say on the small side, but more on the slender side, right? There's not a lot of wasted space there, so to speak.
For sure. For sure.
So in most sports, we tend to break down our training. We have off-season training and we have in-season training. So I'm curious, is this something that you do in motorsports as well? And if so, what are the changes that you might make when designing an in-season versus an off-season program?
Yeah. So, again, it depends on the series. For example, a lot of sports car series are practically year round. So they wrap up in late October and then, they start back up the first of the year, and they have holidays in between, obviously, which makes things a little tricky. So
Sure.
Fortunately for those guys, they have some pretty big gaps between races in their schedules. So that allows us to, it gives us some time to develop whatever traits they may need. For IndyCar, they have a 5 month off season. So,
Oh, wow. That's nice.
Yeah, that's really nice. So, a lot of guys are doing other races in that time, but it still gives us, more than enough time to get them ready for the next season, which obviously makes, my life a lot easier. And then once we're in season, it's primarily just maintenance mode. There are a couple spots on the IndyCar calendar where they have a couple weeks off. So we have time to develop certain areas or regain some adaptations that may have been lost. So when we have these times, we'll ask the driver, what track that's coming up on the schedule they really want to prepare for and what they feel they need to develop a little bit more for that track, which that's actually another really unique thing about racing is, in most sports, the playing field is the same wherever you go. But in racing, it's, a different track each week. In IndyCar, there are ovals, there are road courses, street courses, and, each of these offers their own unique physical challenges. So
Sure.
You have to understand what is required to perform at the highest level possible at each track. So, yeah. And then, with a series like NASCAR, they have a fairly short off season. It's about 3 months, which, is still plenty enough time to get them ready for the start of the season. But then when the actual season starts, they're pretty much every weekend. And, with this layoff with COVID-19, it's going to be crazy when they get back going because, they're planning on doing 2 races a lot of weeks.
Oh, wow.
So like a race on a Wednesday, a race on a Sunday. So, we really don't have the luxury of having breaks to rebuild or improve in the middle of the season. So, it just comes down to maximizing the recovery between races, monitoring stress, and making sure that you get in the right amount and type of training whenever they have time in their calendar to maintain performance through the whole season.
Gotcha. So you said generally NASCAR, I feel like, don't they race pretty much every week? Like every weekend? What about IndyCar? Are there gaps there?
Yeah. So the IndyCar schedule is really, it's really unconventional. So like the first part of the season, generally there's like a race in early March and then it's like a few weeks off and then it's another race. And then, they'll have a couple back-to-back races. Then they get to the month of May and it's pretty much all here at Indy.
Right.
And then June and July, it's a little bit more, what you would expect. It's every single weekend.
Right.
And then once you get to the back half of the season, there are again a couple different spots where they have a week or even 2 weekends off between races.
Gotcha. Now, the reason I asked is I'm just thinking in soccer, right? You kind of know there's a rhythm to soccer in the sense that every Saturday you've got a game, or in football, every Sunday you have a game, and you base the weekly calendar off that, right? Like the training calendar. Yep. So I know if I got a soccer match on Saturday, Tuesday is probably going to be our heavy lifting day. Thursday, we're going to do some stuff in the gym, but it'll be lighter. And then Saturday, we're going to play another match. Do you have like a system or like a flow like that with what you do? Or is it just too dynamic to really kind of have that kind of, I don't know, structure, I guess?
Yeah. So again, it depends on what part of the season we're in.
Right.
I'd say it's a little bit more generally when they're in a phase where they're doing the back-to-back races. the guys are getting back late on a Sunday. So, and having competed on a Sunday, not a whole lot we're going to do on Monday, so might have them come in and just do something more, along the lines of, some mobility work or something like that, and then they take off again on Wednesday or Thursday. So we really have like 1, maybe 2 days to get some work in, and again, we're monitoring, their readiness for training. So we know, how much stress are they capable of handling on those days. So we obviously want to make sure that, when they get out on track for practice on a Thursday or Friday, they're, at 100% ready to go.
Gotcha. That's great, man. So young coaches listening in, and they want to be the next Alex Wanee, right? Like they want to get into training motorsports athletes. What advice would you give them to be successful in starting their career?
Man, that's kind of a tricky question. I walked into a great situation where, my partner, Jim Leo, he's pretty much the godfather of motorsports performance training in America.
Right.
So he had already spent years making all these connections and developing a brand. So, I just walked into a role where I could use my skill set to, help advance the training process and not have to worry about making connections and getting my name out there. So, but I would say the place to start is probably with karting clubs or sports car clubs. Especially if you don't live in Indianapolis or you don't live in Charlotte, North Carolina, where NASCAR teams are based. These kind of clubs are scattered all over the country. So, if you can go and start making connections there, you can kind of get your foot in the door. With karting, you have a lot of young kids who are rapidly advancing to faster and more physical karts, but they have no training background. And then with sports car clubs, it's a lot of rich old guys who are just really out of shape. So there's definitely a need in those two areas. And then as far as an educational standpoint, I would definitely recommend, The Science of Motorsport by my friend David Ferguson, who is a doctor of physiology up at Michigan State University, has done some great research, which he's kind of summarized in that book. So that's kind of a must read just to kind of get an idea of what the demands of motorsports are. And then beyond that, I'd say it's important to really have a good grasp of conditioning. So, Joel Jamison's Ultimate MMA Conditioning and the Bioforce coaching cert they were really instrumental in helping me form some of my principles and give me a clearer vision of what the training process should look like.
I love it, man. So big question time, my guy. If you could alter the space-time continuum and give young Alex Wanee one piece of advice about training and or life, what would it be?
Oh, man. So many things, man. I'd say the biggest one is be patient with yourself. When you're motivated to get better at something, it's way too easy to be your own worst critic.
Yes.
So I tell myself, don't be afraid to make mistakes. Perfection is not the goal. Progress is. Mistakes can be your greatest learning tools. So, just be patient in the process and don't get ahead of yourself.
I love it. Okay, my guy. Last but not least, we've got our lightning round. So 4 fairly short questions, but your answers can be as short or as long as you'd like. All right?
Yep.
Here we go. Number 1, what's your career highlight so far as a coach?
Seeing your athletes have success is always great. So when a driver wins a race or a championship, it's a very rewarding experience. But, on more of a personal side, we had a driver named Robert Wickens who was in a really, really bad accident 2 years ago. So he broke pretty much every bone in his body and suffered a really bad spinal cord injury. So, it's been a long road back and there's still a long way to go, but being just a part of his recovery team has been extremely rewarding. It's, challenged me in new ways, but ultimately he got married last fall, just a little over a year after his accident. And the fact that he could stand up and dance with his wife at his wedding, it's bringing tears to my eyes right now. So, to me, just being a small part of that is probably the most rewarding experience that I've had so far.
I love it, man. That's awesome. Number 2, you're in a role now where you get to mentor young coaches at PitFit. What has that experience been like for you?
To be honest, it's been a huge learning experience for me. It's really forced me to get better. it's one thing to know something, but to teach it and communicate it to others in a way that they can understand is definitely a challenge, to make the complex simple. It really shows you how well you know something. So, that's an area in which people like Bill and yourself have really helped me learn how to communicate these complex ideas to somebody in a more easy to understand way.
I love it, man. Okay, number 3, you kind of mentioned Bill and I, and obviously we've both done some mentoring for you. So you've seen both sides of the equation. So what has it been like, or what have you learned from that experience of now having people that are helping mentor you and help you grow?
It's been great. I feel like when, I really started seeking your guys' help, I was at a place where I had a pretty reasonable breadth of knowledge, but not a whole lot of depth of knowledge. And, so I think our work together has really helped me dig deeper in some areas. Like Bill's intensive was one of the greatest educational experiences of my life. It's amazing to learn and continue to learn from him and all the other great coaches and practitioners in that group. And it's really helped me develop more ironclad principles off of which I can build. And I think the biggest thing that you've helped me with is tying all the pieces together. So, I feel like my generation of coaches is kind of blessed with the opportunity to stand on the shoulders of giants like Bill and yourself, and we live in an information age where, we can pretty much access any information we want immediately, but the downside is that if you're a type A personality, like me, you can kind of fall into this pattern where you just want to devour all this information as quickly as possible. And it's, it becomes really easy to not take the time to truly digest it and see how it fits with your existing knowledge base. So, I think especially over the last couple months, you guys have really helped me, start to fit all the pieces together. And, I feel like I've hit a point where my growth as a coach has really, really taken off again. So it's great to have guys like you who can offer guidance on where to go next to get to where I ultimately want to be.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. And I think it was Frank Shamrock. I don't know. I get the Frank and Ken. I get them confused, but they always talk about like the plus equal minus approach to martial arts, right? Like you should always learn from somebody better. You should always be working against somebody that's equal as you, and you should always be teaching somebody below you. And
absolutely.
I think that's just such a great point for coaches as well, because, look, like there's something at each point, right? Like you need to be challenged by somebody who's superior. You need to work with somebody who's equal to you and bounce ideas off them. And then you need to be teaching somebody below you. And if you're doing that, it kind of covers all of those different areas for you. So great stuff, man. Okay, last but not least, number 4, what's next for Alex Wanee? Once we get released back into the world, what are you going to be doing?
And I was about to say, like, hopefully just racing season will kick back up again here soon. I'm just looking forward to getting out of the house and back in the gym and, coaching again.
Yes.
I'm kind of over the whole Zoom conference thing, but beyond that, just continuing to learn and grow, particularly in the area of, cognitive training. There are just so many questions that don't yet have good answers. So I'm looking forward to reading more research as it comes out and connecting with, some of those researchers that are on the front lines trying to push that area forward.
I love it, man. Well, Alex, you've been amazing to chat with today. Truly appreciate your time. Where can listeners find out more about you and what you've got going on?
Well, I'm not a big tweeter, but we can connect on Facebook, or you can hit me up on Instagram at Alex_Wanee, WANEE, or you can email me at awanee@pitfit.com. I'm always looking to connect with others who are passionate about our field.
Did you look at the show notes before we did this?
I'm not sure.
Do you see at the very top, it says confirm pronunciation of last name. I think I've called you Wanee ever since I've known you. And and I've known you like 10 years, man. How do I mess up your last name?
Man, I've been going through that for like 31 years of my life. So
okay.
just kind of brush it off.
Awesome, man. Well, Alex, dude, thanks again for coming on, man. This was really great to catch up, and I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you for having me on again, Mike.
All right, my friend, that does it for this week's show with Alex. Sincerely hope you enjoyed it. Alex is just an awesome human being. I've been lucky to know him for many years now, and getting to work with him personally in the professional mentoring sense has definitely made me grow to respect him even more, because he's such a dedicated guy. He works so hard to improve his own systems, to give his athletes and the coaches that he works with a better training result. So can't say enough good things about him, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you did, got a small favor to ask. So a while back, it might have been 2 years ago now, I made it a goal to hit 30K downloads in a month. So I want to hit that goal again. It's been a little while. We're consistently 26, 27 downloads, 27,000 that is, downloads in a month. So I would love to get back to that. So if you're not already, make sure you subscribe. Doesn't matter, Stitcher, SoundCloud, iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, the podcast is everywhere. If you're not subscribed, do that now. If you are subscribed, thank you. Share this episode with somebody that you think would benefit from it. You know, maybe somebody that's looking to get into motorsports, somebody that could deal to hear about the value and the virtue of getting a mentor to help you out along the way. So again, as always, thank you so much for your support. Love and appreciate you. And we'll be back soon with our next episode. Take care.